So what we'll do is I'll ask Ronnie we have a question from Ronnie here on AirMeet, so I'll ask that first, and then we'll open to the floor, okay? So first question, I suppose I'll aim this towards Michael, and the reason why I'm aiming it towards yourself is that you mentioned the word SME quite a lot in your presentation, and I think this is kind of it's a tricky one, and it's kind of, I suppose, the one we're always asking the Build Digital project as well is, Ronnie has a question about how the BIM or potential BIM mandate could potentially affect SMEs within the Irish market.
So this is assuming there would be a BIM mandate. There is no BIM mandate at the moment. So the UK did a BIM mandate, and my feeling at the time was that you needed some thresholds. Northern Ireland did a threshold of £2 million, I think it was, for a project. So that was, if it exceeded 2 million, then it needed to comply, had to be done in BIM. UK had 0, and Scotland, I think, had some other threshold as well. So I thought the threshold was probably a reasonable way of for a period of time at least, to say that you needed a certain scale to make this worth it. It is not scaled well at very small projects. In the GA now we're doing fit-outs, let's say, of toilets. We will need information in there, and we will need certain asset information. But do we need everything modelled? We may not have the team with the skills and expertise to do that. So I think we need to think very carefully, about the information that's required. And I think it's back to my thing as well. It's not always models. You could do a fit out on something and change some walls, change the sanitary ware, change whatever. You need to know what went in. If that's broken, how do I get it fixed? What's the warranty on it? That's the kind of key information. That could all be done in an Excel sheet and then brought into an asset management system. So ultimately, I think clients need to get smarter about what they're asking for. I don't think a mandate is absolutely necessary, and I think if it was very strict, it would impact the smaller businesses and smaller contractors. But I think the best thing we can do is get the clients who are asking for information to get them smarter about what they're asking for, is what my advice. So.
Thanks, Michael. Yep. Andrew?
I have just want to make a point and ask a question of you, Michael. First of all, I'd just like to congratulate the RIAI for releasing the guidance. I understand that it was a voluntary by the committee, so I thank the RIAI for that. My question directed at yourself, you talk about the appointing party, and that's on the client side, and then the lead appointed parties. That would suggest that they all have their own BIM execution plan pre and post. So you could have 3 post BIM execution plans out of the one project. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, that's the way ISO 19650 is set up, that each EIR that's put out. So my example earlier was, let's say you had 2 architects for some reason, let's say one doing facade and one doing some fit outs or whatever. So you would have an exchange information requirements for that, and they need to do then a BIM execution plan for how they're going to execute their part of the work. Now, I've seen BIM execution plans that are Bibles. I don't think they need to be that way. I think if a client does a good information requirements, the BIM execution plan can be just a document stating how they're going to execute the project in compliance with that EIR. So
so we're not talking about a federated post BIM execution plan anymore.
No.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay.
Thank you.
A question for Angus, actually, on the shared standards, particularly in Finland and Belgium, Flanders and all that. Were they industry consortiums done as kind of pass equivalents, or were they government-driven standards, really, just on object classifications and level of need?
So in Finland, for example, Finland have had a very active Building Smart chapter for many years, and that the contributors to that come from both public bodies and industry. So a lot of the developments in Finland came out of that chapter, and there was very early on the public bodies were the ones to say we want to buy open standards-based information, and it's going to cost us more early on because it's going to take a while for the supply chain to get up to speed and the software capabilities and the likes, but it will pay back in time. That was the bet they were making. Belgium Flanders has come out of one of the big public asset owners over there. In the Netherlands, it came out of two of the ministries, Ministry for Buildings and the Ministry for Transport. And it's the same when you look across the various countries. It's largely driven by public bodies or ministries or equivalent of government departments here, but with significant collaboration and input from industry.
Sure, because I'm kind of thinking it's something that's very, very important, but like the need of information at different stages for different parties is always different. So I think it's something that industry really needs to be involved in. Like thinking of architectural construction information doesn't have the same need as something for facilities management, and it's different from concept. So it's kind of just very interesting. Thanks.
Thanks, Owen.
Thanks very much. I haven't fully articulated my question, but it's relating to the last two speakers. One around legislation and the government's responsibility in terms of managing how we operate as a system, and the second is related to the blockchain. And you mentioned trust and how the blockchain provides trust. Well, I think depending on the country you're in, the sovereign state, there's different levels of trust and whether we can be trusted. And whether we trust it, I mean, there is measurements we can trust. Ireland is, I think, number 23, I think, on some measurements of trust to some better countries. But is there? There's no question. There's a need for a ledger to manage data. Should that be managed by either a European state or a sovereign state, rather than some blockchain out in the ether? Like, if you trust your country, should the state have? It's like a virtual infrastructure, the same way we have roads and we have fiber optics. Do the state has a responsibility to provide the ledgers and trust them? And then it doesn't need to be a complicated technology. It could be a much simpler technology, just by a trusted organisation.
Well, what we've been hearing here is many different ways in which you can trust the information that you're giving, the IRs, whatever. And so there's an awful lot. People have to go away, read books, become experts on it. And then they need that to stay in place because that's their job. The way we find with our students and trust, we have students from all over Europe and from across the world. And so often they come from traditions where they've had a teacher in front of them and they sit at the desk and they take it. And suddenly when you enable them to go and do work, and then we got accreditation from RICS 10, 15 years ago, and they sent 3 different teams over because they couldn't hack our exam format. The whole semester, you make a PowerPoint presentation, 15 minutes. 15 minutes later, we give you a grade. We don't go looking at thousands of documents. We don't read 1,000 reports. We want them to come with a coherent, complete design. And so they do the design. Well, we give them the design, but they do the mech and elect, they do the contracting, they do we actually estimate the buildings as well. So they do the whole gamut, taking all through the stages. And what RICS couldn't get their head around was how can we be certain that there's nobody just coming under the door, sliding along. And it's peer pressure. People would say, you've done nothing. You're not coming up to exam. And so it actually it levels out itself. You'd be surprised. But Rick sent 3 teams over before they accepted our explanation. Does that answer your question?
Maybe I can pick up on the trust thing as well, a couple of examples. So, for example, my understanding is when we're looking at Google Maps and we see that we're going from Dublin into Kildare, Google Maps is reading that data from Ordnance Survey Ireland, publicly published open data, which is in a machine-readable format online. And Google can trust that data because it's published in a certain format, it's come from a certain body, and it's been tagged to say that this is the latest version of that data set. Not that our boundaries in Ireland tend to change. We don't beyond gerrymandering and locally, but so another. What's really important there is that you've got a body with a clear responsibility, and others who know that that body has that responsibility. And that's very well set out in the ISO 19650 series, is that you assign responsibility for people to do things, organizations to do things, hand over information that others can then trust. And I've seen numerous examples of that being a problem. For example, in the UK, where you had contractors being paid a lot of money to do as-built surveys of their construction, handed over to the asset owners. The asset owners didn't trust it, even though their colleagues in project management had procured it, and went out and resurveyed the assets. So something's fallen down there, you know. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but.
I suppose the question is, it's just the complication of blockchain. Is it necessary? If you have all the measures in place, if there's good auditing and there's good, like the existing processes we have to manage, whether it's safety or anything, I mean, it's effective in some industries. You know, some industries are safe. Aviation has a good safety record.
When we changed to BIM in 2006, we got that argument down our throats. Why would we change? We've something that works. It works. We've got our silos. I'm happy. Why do I need it? It's too much investment to go into. What we found when we send our students out initially, the phone was ringing going, "What? We can't use them. We can't use them. What are we going to do?" But now we can't get them back, because once you have a positive case and once you have stuff, because the beauty of BIM is you actually, that you see the model. It's visual. You can't touch it, but you're pretty certain that if you can model it, you can build it. And so that takes us away from drawings where you're on site. How do I do this?
I totally accept BIM 100%. It's the block. It's the technology.
I think we're going through the same step again now.
Example, okay.
And the way I describe it there, one offered us the ether so that we could now work in peace, and this one is offering us the oil so that everything moves together.
On blockchain, I know the principles of blockchain and distributed ledger and how each node is linked back to the previous one, so you can't break it. But in practical application of that on construction and asset information management, I don't know how that works, and I'm yet to be convinced. But it's nice to hear other people who are convinced already.
Shall I tell you how it works? That'll be over at Guinness.
I just have two. I've just one or two questions as well, because I just don't want everyone that's sitting up here. Sorry, I'll get up here. I've just one or two questions here, because I'd be afraid to end this, and some of the speakers got away without actually answering a question. So, Andrew, I have a quick question for you, if that's okay. And just a quick question is, the title of your presentation was going and just discussing the role of the architectural technologists. From my perspective, I'm extremely well aware of the huge role that you play in any construction process. And you know, that's mainly through my colleagues Malachy Matthews and TU Dublin, as well as working with the likes of Claire, who's on our BIM programs, and the important role that they're integrated across. In today, what are you seeing will be the greatest challenge that architectural technologists are facing today? And could you kind of probably give us any advice as educators, maybe to try help overcome them?
The greatest, I think architectural technology is coming out on its own as a profession. It's now standing out. We have the education behind that now. We've got accredited courses. Michael, my colleague, will tell you how many, but maybe 6 universities now, TU Dublin being one of them. So it's great to hear Kevin and yourself speak. So the education is there. The architectural technologists are out in industry. I think it's just a natural progression in terms of challenges. It's just time. Okay. There is a little bit of getting that recognised at government level. So that is one challenge that CIT are fully supporting the architectural technologists, and now the RAI are also supporting as well. So once we get onto that statutory level, that will open up more avenues for the architectural technologists to, again, come into their own. But we do play a pivotal role in the AC industry.
No, absolutely, a huge role, without a shadow of a doubt. Just a quick question to my colleague Kevin Forlong. Look, well, I'm obviously quite aware of the significant work that you're doing at 2U Dublin and how you're driving this multidisciplinary collaboration. And it's, I know we had to kind of rush through the presentation, but I think it was quite obvious the terrific work that's going on in that module. Have you found that the front loading of the documentation has helped with the kind of the students understanding the design, or have you found them overwhelmed?
It's a question actually I often ask the students myself. At the end of the module, do you see now the reason for producing all of this documentation at the start of the module? Because at the start of the module, I can see them looking, can we not get into the modeling? Can we not do something else instead of getting all this documentation together? It's only at the end of the module when I ask the question again, do you now see the reason why you actually had the EIR, you responded with a proper BIM execution plan that included task information delivery plans, master information delivery plans. You knew then throughout the whole process who was responsible for what, to what level of detail and at what stage. It's plainly obvious that has helped the entire process go forward. And even going back to industry myself, I can see that what held up projects most was just looking for that information, or who was responsible for that information. So doing this to me, that's what we're trying to do, in my opinion, with this whole BIM thing, is just make our industry more efficient, more transparent. It's not trying to catch anybody out. It's just literally trying to make it more efficient. So, yeah, at the start, I wouldn't say they misunderstand having to do all of the documentation. It is a little bit more laborious, but the efficiency that's gleaned from that throughout the rest of the design stages is very evident, yeah.
Thanks, Kevin. I think we have time for one more question, if we have it from the audience, or is there any questions? Okay, that's perfect, yeah.
I'll make it quick, even though I don't drink Guinness. What do you think it's going to take for industry associations like the ones that you represent to change the mindset of the client from choosing option A?
A good test case. Seeing is believing. If one project does it, they'll be talking at the golf club, how did you save so much? And next time they'll be saying, I want this in whatever. Don't know. Anyone else want to respond?
Well, what I'm seeing, I think, at the moment is I'm seeing a little bit more expertise coming into the client side of things as well. So I think that's and they're asking for it as well, because I think they now know projects, large projects especially, and medium-sized projects need to be delivered in BIM, but they really need to understand how that happens. And I think if you do it wrong once, you're not going to do it again as well. So I suppose our advice document from the RII is geared towards clients, but it's also geared towards anyone who's producing information who are being asked for BIM, so that they can actually understand what the reasonable benchmark for a good requirements documentation coming out is, so that they can actually ask the right questions. So clients really, they do have to get up to speed, but they're already doing a lot of this. They're just, they're asking, they're looking at, what we need in the building, what the capacity of it is. They're getting inundated with regulations. They need to get a building built that adds value, that's bankable. And that is, they now need to look at sustainability. They need to look at, make sure it's accessible, it's future-proofed, it's reconfigurable if anything needs to be done in future. But they need models and data to go with that. And they're starting to ask those questions now: is what should we be asking for? They've a couple of choices. They can go out to the market and say, we've got a consultant basically who knows this information and will assist us with that. But if you're a larger client and you're doing multiple buildings, you'll probably want to bring that information in-house. Or even if you go to the market and get someone, you'll need to get that knowledge from that first project both the knowledge and the lessons learned, so that you can replicate that again on the next project. So it's, I think clients, we're starting to see that happening now, and I think it's coming down the line. So I'm hoping the BIM pack will get out there and get to the clients, and they'll hopefully start to see that there's steps they need to take, considerations that they need to look at to do things right. So it's so I think we're starting to see it now. I think it's we've seen a lot of things not done very well, but I think we've all been grappling with the technology. We've been grappling with the new ways of doing things, and there's something new every day. I mean, the amazing stuff you can do with drones now is just phenomenal. It's now replacing ways or processes that we did before, but we're always going to have that, and we've got to keep adjusting our process, but we've got to make sure that they work well for our needs, for everyone's needs. So I think we're moving in the right direction. But we have to. We've no choice. We have to build better. So.
I think, in fairness,
just briefly,
I think, in fairness, in the last 10 or 15 years, we have seen a significant maturing of public clients in how they procure projects across the UK and Ireland. We've seen going from 100% price on works contracts. In some cases, you see even 70% quality, 30% price, which is a huge shift for public clients. We've had cases of average pricing. So if you're not within a certain range of the average prices that were submitted by the contractors, you're excluded, which basically takes out the low one and the high one. It's very impressive. A lot of early contractor involvement, two-stage procurement processes. So I think, in fairness, we're seeing, certainly on big civil infrastructure projects, less and less of the lowest price wins, which is hopefully good.
We were just out last night, and one of my colleagues from Northern Ireland was saying at the end of the month there's a new rule coming in where you have to do LCA and extra things. And so he had his client around his house saying, can you not push that through so I'm not hassled with all this? And Andy had actually sat him down and says, if you do this, you probably sell the house for more and get better. But he had to take him by the hand through this, as if you go with the house now under the current regs, when it gets out on the market, people will be pushing it away with barge pole. So that kind of thing is beginning to happen.
I think everyone wants to talk.
No,
good question, Chris. But now, just from my perspective, I've been really enthused with the conversations going on. But from a client, I guess, if they can trust the new technologies like blockchain, and then they can trust the design team more, maybe that's a trigger. I think blockchain is really interesting. I want to trust that I can get my cart at the end of the day. So if I have faith in the blockchain, I can get my cart or point to Guinness or what my pension paid for. But I do think clients are maturing all the time. They are asking the questions. So I think there is an energy with all these professionals here today and online. We know we can do it, but we need the client on board as well. It's a holistic thing. Listening to some of the QS remarks earlier and talking to some at the booths, it's about carbon as well, being able to manage that. And I think that should be higher on the agenda as well. And we saw some graphs earlier where it's a bit low. So I think all of them will hopefully get clients online.
Brilliant. Look, that brings our session here today to a close. I'd like to show my appreciation for the panel, and I'd also like to show my appreciation to Ralph and the team for what put together. It's a tremendous event and quite extremely successful, so a huge applause for them if possible. Thank you.